listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, what's the solution to our energy crisis and how do we lower our power bills? Chris O'Keefe from the Clean Energy Council will join us to explain why he believes renewables are the answer. But first, let's check the headlines this Wednesday, the 9th of April. The second round of Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs have now come into effect, including a 104% hike on Chinese goods imported into the US. Mr. Trump and his Chinese counterpart are now locked in an escalating trade war, which is continuing to have ramifications across the world, especially on the financial markets. But the US president is not backing down.
Right now, China's paying a 104% tariff. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but they charged us for many items 100%, 125%. Many countries have. They've ripped us off left and right. But now it's our turn to do the ripping.
In Australia, there's a 25% tariff on our steel and a blanket 10% on most other exports to the US. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the numbers don't make sense.
The United States has a trade surplus with Australia of around about 2 to 1. They have had that since the Truman presidency, and therefore not only is it an act of economic self-harm for the United States, but it certainly is not an appropriate action.
In other news, Virginia Giuffre, the woman at the centre of the Giuffre Epstein sex abuse scandal, who also made allegations against Prince Andrew, did not appear in a Perth court today. The 41-year-old is accused of breaching a family violence order. Her lawyer appeared today on her behalf. Ms. Giuffre's case was adjourned until June, where she will have to enter a plea. The court case comes after reports she has been released from hospital after a bus accident where she claims she had just days to live. And a teenage Aussie sprinter has broken a 57-year-old 100-metre race record. 17-year-old Leah O'Brien from WA won the under-18 girls race at the National Championships in Perth with a legal time of 11.14 seconds, just beating Raylene Boyle's record she set in the 1968 Mexico Olympic Games. Now to our deep dive. Energy, like the cost of living crisis, is one of the top issues for voters this federal election. Both leaders have offered plenty of promises to stop our skyrocketing bills. But how do we fix our power problems and build a safe and reliable future? Chris O'Keefe from the Clean Energy Council says renewables are the answer, and it's a tough reality our nation needs to face. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. I'd say second on the agenda for the upcoming election behind cost of living is energy. Everyone knows our power bills are through the roof. Can you try and cut out some of the spin with these energy policies from both the Prime Minister, the Labor Party and the Coalition? What's on the table?
Well, as it stands right now, the federal government's been pretty straightforward. The Labor Party's been pretty open and honest about the fact that they want to get to 82% of the grid being generated by renewable energy. That's solar, that's wind, that's big batteries, that's pumped hydro by 2030, so 5 years' time. On the flip side, the Coalition, they want to build $600 billion, or they say it's going to cost $331, but it's likely to cost $600 with international experience, entirely taxpayer-funded nuclear power plants, 7 of them, to come online sometime in the 2040s. And in the interim, burn a whole lot of gas with a cap on renewable generation of 54%. So they're the two policies. Now, obviously, I'm the national spokesperson from the Clean Energy Council, so I've got a pretty strong view on which one is the better policy. I'll never tell anyone how to vote. But you look at wholesale prices, and we are where we are. If we had a situation, Tash, where, in the 1950s or 60s, Australia decided to build a nuclear reactor and generate electricity from it, we'd be having a different conversation about what's the best way to net zero, or then the best way to the lowest power bill. But we didn't. Nuclear power is not an industry in Australia. It does not exist. So starting from scratch will take at least 20 years. It's extraordinarily expensive. And what it won't do is help your power bills in the here and now. And I think that's what people are after.
You make a great point, Chris, because it's here and now. That's what we need. We don't need promises in the future. And I think that's been a big issue with the coalition's policy. You can even see Mr Dutton has stepped back from nuclear. In his budget reply, I think he mentioned the word nuclear only twice, and they've kind of flipped to the gas reservation policy. Mr Dutton has announced today that he believes this way forward will actually reduce household electricity bills by around 3% next year, and even a greater amount for local businesses and industry. Do you think that's achievable?
Well, it's a big call. It's 3%. It's not a whole lot. And the other side of it is the gas producers, the people getting the gas out of the ground in Australia, think it's a terrible idea. So what does that tell you? One of our concerns at the Clean Energy Council is you just look at it from a pure economics point of view. If you use gas to generate electricity, that is right now in Australia the most expensive fuel you can use. The most expensive fuel. So it's roughly $300 a megawatt hour to use gas to generate electricity. Solar and wind, backed up by big batteries, are sub $100 a megawatt hour. The whole idea here is we are where we are. I keep saying it. We are where we are. We've got the technology now to build wind farms, solar farms, backed up by big batteries. And yes, we will need a little bit of gas, without question. We will need gas as we continue to build or rebuild our national energy system. The thing is, you don't want to use too much gas because it's super expensive. You want to use as much of the cheap stuff as possible. And as we transition and coal comes out of the system, that's the plan. That's the idea. Use as much cheap stuff as much as you humanly can and save the expensive stuff for when you absolutely need it.
Transition's an important part of this whole puzzle, Chris, because in many regional and rural areas, the coal industry is a huge employer of local people. And that also then puts the money into local economies in country and rural towns. What would you say to people that say, okay, you know, we are where we are and we need to actually look what we're doing to preserve our future moving forward with energy?
Well, no one's advocating, or we're certainly not, and I'm certainly not advocating for coal mining to stop. There's a difference between mining and coal-fired power stations, coal-fired energy. And unfortunately, the reality is that, yes, mining generates a whole bunch of jobs. They're not going anywhere. But these coal-fired power stations are really old, really, really old. 90% of them are slated for retirement in the next 10 years on the East Coast, 90%. And the older they get, the more unreliable they get. And if they break down like we've seen in Victoria, like we've seen in Queensland, like we've seen in New South Wales, when they break down, they're not feeding electricity into the grid. So if we're not getting electricity into the grid and we haven't got renewables to the point where that's dominating the grid, there's not enough electricity, supply and demand, up goes your bills. So that's what we're seeing. Now, when we talk about regional communities, I think it's a really good point, Tash, because this is where the vast majority of the renewable energy projects are being built. So local communities in country towns that have never had an energy industry before, all of a sudden have wind and solar projects knocking on their doors and in their backyards. Now, it is absolutely critical that these big renewable energy companies, our industry, partners with regional communities. But just have a think about the jobs that they're creating here. In the next 5 years, the clean energy industry in Australia will generate 40,000 jobs. 40,000 in 5 years. It's a really interesting conversation that we're having, but it is happening now. And, you know, it's one we've got to get our head around.
Chris, you make a great point again about regional areas because we have to support rural and regional parts of Australia, and that's great if there's thousands of jobs on the horizon. There's a place near Wellington in the central west of New South Wales, and all you can see for hundreds and hundreds of acres are these solar panels. What is the longevity of those solar panels and what happens to those solar panels once they've expired?
They last 20 odd years and they're almost entirely recyclable. So the glass, silicon, and they're effectively made into more solar panels. That's how they're recycled. So the old solar panels are recycled into new solar panels. And a lot of people I've been all around Australia looking at these projects, Tash, and people often ask about amenity. Oh, it doesn't look real good. I don't know about it on the countryside. And I think to myself, well, we need energy. The whole country needs energy. Civilization needs energy to exist. Are they any worse than an open-cut coal mine or a coal-fired power station? Any worse than a nuclear power station? The truth is that I've been to a solar farm just outside of Orange, and the sheep are grazing underneath the solar panels. It's crazy, but yes, the sheep are grazing underneath the solar panels. Likewise with the wind turbines. So I think local communities are certainly, without question, partnering with these renewable energy projects. And if you think about wind turbines, I know there's questions about how easily they can be recycled. 95% of them can be. The problem is in the fiberglass blades. But even then, they're only looking about 4,000 tonnes of fiberglass blade landfill a year. Tash, you know how much landfill Australia generates every year? 21 million tonnes. So it's well and truly under 1%. And I just think we've got to put this stuff into perspective. It's generating energy that we all use every day. And the coal stations are coming out whether you like it or not. We've got to replace it with something, and we've got to replace it with the cheapest form of energy possible on the market, and that's renewable energy.
These are really important conversations we have to have because, many people may say Australia was way behind in looking at the future of energy and how we basically survive. In regards to Labor's policy, now we know famously Mr Albanese promised that our electricity, our power bills would decrease by $275 a year. That was a broken promise. They can't do it. So one may argue, will we really see a reduction in power bills moving forward from the current government?
Well, I think the home battery scheme's a good scheme, really good scheme. So I know it's not going to be for everyone, but it certainly allows individual households and individual families to make their own minds up about what they do with that excess solar they generate during the day. So you've got 4 million Australian households, 4 million, right? There's only 11 million Australian households as is. So 4 million have decided to put rooftop solar on. If you're listening right now and you've got rooftop solar, Tash, you save money from it. You save money from your power bills off it. Now, just imagine for a second all that solar you're generating in the middle of the day, you charge up a battery and you use that free electricity at night time. So you're talking about a $2,300 saving with rooftop solar and a home battery. The problem with batteries is they've just been too expensive, right? So a 30% discount like the Albanese government is offering on these things will, without a shadow of a doubt, make your power bills cheaper, without a shadow of a doubt. And we're talking about batteries that have cost $4,300, some of them, so a 30% discount, you're making a really good saving there.
But I've got to ask this question because you're an old journo. You know exactly you've got to answer this question. Right now, if I can't afford a solar panel, if I can't afford that battery at home, my bills haven't gone down by $275 a year.
No, but you've had a $300 saving from each and every taxpayer who's given a energy bill reduction. So $300, then you'll get an extra $150 into the next financial year. So there's energy bill relief coming. And, I'm not a Labor Party person. I'm not defending the government by any stretch of the imagination. They decided to, put that $275 figure. I'm sure they regret it, but we are where we are. And there's been a lot happen around the world since then. We've had a lot of long tails since COVID, plus a war in the Middle East and a war in Ukraine. I just think that we need to level with the Australian people and go, okay, what's the cheapest path forward? Option A, option B. Option A is 82% renewable by 2030. Option B, wait for nuclear power, 20 years off, entirely taxpayer funded, $600 billion, and burn a hell of a lot of expensive gas in the interim and subsidise coal-fired power stations that are breaking down all over the joint. So they're the two options you've got. They're the two options Australia have. There's no point in relitigating political fights of the past, in my view, because Australians just want to know, okay, where are we going? What's reliable? What's the cheapest path forward? And whichever way you cut it, Tash, whichever way you cut it, clean energy is certainly the cheapest path forward.
Where do you think, from an overall point of view, Chris, we've gone so horribly wrong? I'm not saying it's Labor's fault or the Coalition's fault. In regards to right now in 2025, every Australian, their bills have gone through the roof, whether that's gas, electricity, especially for businesses. It's not just households, it's struggling small businesses. Their bills have absolutely skyrocketed. And now we're seeing right across the country during summer or winter, we have massive power outages. Where do you think we've gone so horribly wrong as a country?
Well, I've got two sort of views on this. One, this is the biggest reshaping of our energy market since the Industrial Revolution. This is a big deal, like a really, really big deal. And this is not something that's easy to handle. It's not going to be smooth. It is going to be lumpy, and it will continue to be lumpy without question. But the world is doing it, and Australia must do it. There is no private investment around coal-fired power stations. You're not going to build new ones. And even if you wanted to, 10 years into the future, the problem that the Australian people have had, thanks to its governments, we've been very slow to act. And we've effectively argued since John Howard and George W. Bush got together around Kyoto. Remember Kyoto all the way back when, in the early 2000s?
Yes.
And we've just been dragging our feet on the inevitable ever since. But in a funny way, I like to think that Australia has come a really long way. So 12 years ago, put it this way, 12 years ago, the first grid-scale solar farm plugged into the grid in Geraldton. The first, just 12 years ago. Now we're at close to half of all the east coast of Australia's energy needs being generated by clean energy sources. Tash, we've saved ourselves 30% of emissions. We've cut emissions by 30% in the electricity sector as a result of what we've done so far. We've created hundreds of thousands of jobs. We've got tens of billions of dollars of investment from all over the place into our country, which makes our standard of living better, which makes our lives better, which employs people. All of that's good stuff. It's not perfect, but a challenge of this scale is certainly not going to be perfect. But I just think if sometimes we take a step back and look to have a bit of perspective about where we started from and where we are now, it's a pretty good achievement. And that's with both sides of politics being in charge for big periods of that time.
Well, let's hope it certainly works for all Australians. We appreciate your time, Chris. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tash.
That was Chris O'Keefe from the Clean Energy Council. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or our deep dive of the day. You can also follow us on our socials on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom. That's spelled LISTNR. And we'll be back in your feed at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company. See you tomorrow.